I kind of really just needed a reset button, but it was one of the best things that I ever did just because of the discipline that was instilled through the military allowed me to be able to push through those different breaks and stuff that I had needed to within the business side of things, as well as networking and stuff. And, fast forward, you have the book is about, oh my gosh, the book is about one little single year, within that military spectrum, and people like, wow, this is and I'm like, no, this was 1 year. Time at war was absolutely, now looking back at it, I kind of see what my cousin was trying to tell me. And I put it in there like to where he pulled me aside and he was like, you joined up in a time of war, man. Like, you're nuts. I don't know if I would have done that. But at the same time, I got that full spectrum of exactly like if you look at, whether for the better or for worse, if you look at somebody who's joining the military, I got that full experience. That's for sure. And this particular deployment that I wrote about was, we had a 52% casualty rate, which is something that's just unheard of.
Hello, listeners, and welcome back again to Leading with Integrity. Damn the Valley is partly the name of this episode, but it was also a phrase regularly uttered by the soldiers who spent any amount of time in the Arghandab River Valley, Afghanistan, in 2009 to 2010. The valley has claimed casualties from the troops of Alexander the Great to the British Empire, even the Russian army in more recent centuries. My guest today is Will Yeske, a combat veteran who served 11 years in the United States Army, including a deployment to that particular valley. It was a deployment that the media didn't talk about, and the government even today doesn't acknowledge. 3 of their company were killed, more than a dozen suffered life-changing injuries, and half of the company were injured, all of which added up to a 52% casualty rate, almost unheard of in modern military history. And so Will is now the author of a riveting book called Damn the Valley, giving a first-hand account of life on that deployment in one of the most challenging districts of that war. And today he's a serial entrepreneur who brings significant expertise in marketing, IT, and project management. And he currently runs and operates a marketing company, No Limits Marketing Group, originally founded to help small businesses survive the COVID-19 pandemic. Will was also a founding board member of a veteran non-profit. He's worked on other veteran-based projects, and he's an excellent podcast guest as well, which you will be finding out very shortly, listener. We're going to be talking about all of those experiences, his career journey so far, how to find humor even in the most difficult and stressful environments, and his biggest leadership lessons. If you haven't visited yet, then do head over to www.leadernotaboss.com, sign up for the newsletter so you'll never miss an update, and you'll also receive an invitation to join my online Integrity Leaders community. Now let's welcome Will onto the show.
Welcome to the Leading with Integrity podcast. Leadership talk for the modern manager. With your host, David Hatch.
William, or Will, thank you very much for joining me this morning. It's great to meet you. Lovely to have you on the show today.
Great to be here.
We're going to kick things off, as I always do, by really just handing the reins over to my guest to introduce yourself, tell the listeners a bit about your career so far, your background, what you get up to today, and why you do it.
Oh, man. Well, I guess we're here because I wrote a book.
Yeah, good place to start. Yeah,
right. But I mean, grew up in the States, a little small New England town of Connecticut, and kind of I mean, my dad was in business, so I got to see a little bit of those inner workings and the things around from that. It was Springs and Manufacturing, but they were global. They serviced everybody, and it was kind of neat to see that back end and then start translating later on in life. So you were saying before we got on, you're from a little small, I know this is not that small of a village, but, a town of 8,000 people is, it's nestled in, it's pretty small. And where you have this, business in the middle of town is a clock tower, actually, because the town was built after Seth Thomas clocks. It kind of grew around manufacturing. It was just one of those quintessential New England towns. And he was sort of the Henry Ford of clocks. And the town grew up around him. And, that's where I ended up growing up. Some of the nice parts about that were, you've got a lot of twisty roads out there. And that's how I got involved. I just progressed, as a guy, we like cars, and it went from, driving like a little wild man on the road, our little, there's definitely some times when this stuff is better off kept at the track. That's for sure. Especially these days. Like, man, I don't know what it's either that maturity to recognize we're not, but it eventually led me into some stuff with motorsports. I had kind of been thinking about military at the time, but was talked out of it with college and went over the motorsports end of things and started out with BMW and then kind of branched. I was on the pit crew there and then branched off on my own and did some stuff with Subaru and was racing a car and rally for a little bit. So that was a blast. And that came around full circle later. I mean, there was, I ended up, there was a life instance to where I kind of did an evaluation and, I was heartbroken at the time, but it was like, hey, you had always wanted to do the military. You wanted to do something that had a larger purpose than yourself. And up until now, a lot of it's been geared towards you. So before you really have, what are you going to do here? Where are you going to put your eggs? And I kind of really just needed a reset button, but it was one of the best things that I ever did just because of the discipline that was instilled through the military allowed me to be able to push through those different breaks and stuff that I had needed to within the business side of things, as well as networking and stuff. And, fast forward, you have the book is about, oh my gosh, the book is about one little single year, within that military spectrum and people like, wow, this is and I'm like, no, this was 1 year. Time at war was absolutely, now looking back at it, I kind of see what my cousin was trying to tell me. And I put it in there like to where he pulled me aside and he was like, you joined up in a time of war, man. Like you're nuts. I don't know if I would have done that. But at the same time, I got that full spectrum of exactly like if you look at, whether for the better or for worse, if you look at somebody who's joining the military, I got that full experience. That's for sure. And this particular deployment that I wrote about was, we had a 52% casualty rate, which is something that's just unheard of when it comes to a modern day deployment. I know that we saw a lot of stuff in like out of Lashkargah and stuff to where the British counterparts and stuff were getting, but so we had a group of Gurkhas out there with us. And so the up armored guys with the House of Houses, they were doing all right. Because they had the larger, armored vehicles, but you get those Gurkhas out there and here they are rolling through Lash with these light skin, Land Rover Defenders and they're getting tore up and we're just like, let us go out with you guys, man. And I don't know whether it was commanders at the time or what, but, there was not much of a, they didn't want us out there with us. I don't think it was the actual lower end of the Gurkhas, but I know, and I'm trying to think of the name of the British commander. They didn't, I think the exact words were, we don't need a bunch of American paras, mucking around the battlefield. So we yeah, we just, we rolled with it. And, but I mean, here we are, I mean, this is what, 13 years after, when this gets put down, and you have, the guys that aren't with us anymore, and the guys that aren't with us from instances and stuff afterwards. So really, this was the need to kind of put something like an historical record down, which is really what it just progressed. It went from a, what are you going to do with this? And it kind of led to the same thing that I put forward in my business end of things is, all right, how do we build in, once it really hit, it was how do we build in on more value? How do we build in something that people haven't seen before? How do we make this so tangible? So, I mean, you have the book here, but this has been since February. I've been posting daily stuff on social, but then you can also go down to the Airborne and Special Operations Museum in Fayetteville, North Carolina, which is right around the corner from the base, that the 82nd Airborne is out of. And you can see stuff that was in the book. You can see, they had the UCP Deltas was the specific uniform. So it was an experimental uniform. We were one of the only ones to get fielded. Well, we were the only one to get fielded it. I know there was some leftovers that some of the guys used here and there. Apparently they're collector's items now. No, I'm like, you go on eBay and you look up UCP Delta and you can find these things for $1,000 for a uniform top. And I'm like, man, we got back and we burned these things.
Oh dear. That's a missed opportunity, isn't it?
Well, you don't think about that. And that was,
no, of course. Yeah.
One of the other things, in, reaching out to guys and like, hey, what does everybody have? Once word and stuff started to come back. So like the front cover of the book even has a picture, and a lot of people don't realize that picture is actually from the battlefield. And, so that actually is, I think there's two guys in the picture, but there's three of them that were going through, and they found the flag as they're digging out this base. And what had happened was the Taliban ran a 1,000-pound vehicle bomb down the road at their entry control point and detonated it. As soon as they started taking fire and stuff, they detonated it, and it was big enough to where it flattened the compound. It buried a lot of guys alive. There was a few Afghan children that died in it. And like after everybody was recovered, they saw this flag, and they started pulling it out of the dirt and the rocks. And one of them snapped this picture. So they hoisted the flag back up after to kind of give that message of, hey, you can knock us down, but we're here to stay. We're not going anywhere. So it really embodied a lot of, what the guys felt out there in that, that resilience and stuff, and that resilience that was needed. And quite honestly, it's, that resilience is still needed, in a lot of their lives and stuff to get through. Yeah. I mean, we could all use some of those lessons and stuff that were taught through there, but I guess, it's all on how you take it. It's all how you translate it out.
Wow. So fair to say quite an interesting journey then from motorsport to war. That's it's certainly unique, I think.
Well, and then even afterwards, you have you get out and it's like, what do you do? Because this doesn't translate over, at least at first in your head. You don't see the correlations. So you're looking at it and you're saying, well, what skills do I have? I mean, what did we do? We jumped out of planes and went bump at night. And our job was literally, you have the 82nd Airborne, one of their jobs is airfield seizure, but the Rangers kind of have that as well. But where does that translate over to civilian life? And you have to start looking at those disciplines and the ability to stick it out and then to do those routine type things that a lot of people have issues doing. We live on that. And you start taking these frameworks, and I was like, oh, I can use this in college. and I can use this. At my undergrad, I finished business school there 2.5 years. And really it was that half semester, it would have been 2, but that half semester, I was kind of open to, like, well, what do I do here? I have something to where I'm not in the business school classes yet due to a lapse from a calculus class. Go figure. So when you're living off of GI Bill money during then, you're like, I can't stop college because there's, how can I best prop this up? And I took a journalism class. I took a graphics art class and stuff. And these classes even, they were like, hey, these are 300-400 level classes. Like, you shouldn't be taking these. And I'm like, or who's the professor? And you just go directly to the professor and you say, hey, look, this is where I see it tying in and stuff and moving forward. And, and they all were like, wow, like, this is quite the vision. Like, you do realize I'm going to grade you just as harshly as everybody else. And I'm like, that's fine. Let's do it. And, I ended up doing great. Those it all worked out. And really, at my final year, oh my gosh, the drive, they were like, yo, you are in like every competition. You're in every team exercise stuff. You're in every, and I'm like, cause I need to be like, these kids, it is a good school, but at the same time, like, when you don't know what right looks like, as far as a leadership role, you got to be able to see that, and I finally had enough, on that whole, look, I'm the old guy and everything, but, there was, I know the cringe moment for the professor, but I raised my hand at one point, cause I knew what they were doing. They've been big on this team stuff and collaborative efforts, lately, which quite honestly is the way to go. But I raised my hand in the beginning and, I was like, hey, can I just say something before you break down to all these teams and stuff? And she great. It was like, yeah, sure. Why not? She had no idea what was going to come of it. And, I was like, hey, who's tired of being left out, or being that guy to pull the team forward, where everybody else doesn't pull their weight? I'm like, I'm going to form a team over here. I'm not moving. Like, and if it's just me, so be it. I'm like, but I feel like there's a bunch of other people in this room. I was like, and here's the deal though, is that if you come to this team, you'll pull your own weight, because if you don't, your teammates that are on here, we will make sure that you fail. Like, we'll go to the professor that you have not pulled your end. We'll show the workload and then we'll just move on without you. I'm like, it's okay. It was, number one, it was the quickest filled team out of all of them. But like, we went all the way forward to we didn't win it, but we did a competition against, we were in the finals for some competition. I think we beat out the 20 in the initial round, and we ended up with like 7 people in this competition at the very end. That was a case study whole thing, and you have to speak in front of a board panel and stuff. And it had to do with fintech, but it was really cool to see, where you could take it when you just get out there. You put yourself out there and you're like, you know what, and you surround yourself with the people, those like-minded people that are willing to do the work.
Yeah, I think everyone in the audience who's ever been to school of any kind can probably identify with that position as well. There's always someone, isn't there, that you get paired with at some point who just doesn't do any of the work.
Even in the military, it really is. But it's those teams when you get everybody puts forward their, whether it's, whatever they're capable of doing, but pulling that weight, that makes the difference. It really does.
Absolutely. Yeah. It makes me think maybe that's why a lot of the teachers and professors won't let you pick your own group. You get put because they know otherwise all of those people who do all the work will gravitate to that one group and none of the other groups will do anything.
He definitely, he was one of the things that we did, and it kind of changed, on our own. We had finished, the final exercise and stuff, and we had everything together and it looked good. So you're like, hey, we could sit back, or why not take this to the professor and be like, look, this is what we have so far to give you on everything. And this is our idea, but what are your thoughts? And we did that, and he was entrepreneurial. guy, and he just looked at us and he was like, "You're the first team to ever do that over here." And it's kind of cool they just had this same competition. I just spoke over at Towson University last week, but they had that same competition over there. And that was one of the things is like, I heard about people bringing things to the professor early and stuff. And I'm like, look at that,
That's always nice to hear, isn't it? Obviously, your time in the military has been a pretty pivotal part of your life. So I'd like to ask a couple of questions around that. And the first of those is, what would you say are some of the most overlooked or misunderstood aspects of military life?
So I was in Bravo Company 2508. And I was reading another book from another company about this particular, the same area we're in. So like there's other people from other companies now with this that have caught wind of this and been like, yes, I've inspired some to put down their own stories, as well as, I was inspired myself by another book that came out about, it was like the first one that came out about this conflict. But the thing about Bravo Company that everybody noticed was that we were head and shoulders disciplined above everybody else. And, where it's the discipline that was kind of pointed out was that our uniforms, like boots were always bloused. Everything, if you were in a ceremony, it was freaking crisp. If you were, the haircuts and stuff, that was, those standards and stuff were adhered to no matter what. JRTC during training events, like you had to be in line on it. And a lot of people grumbled about that. I did too. I was like, man, this is ridiculous. This first sergeant's busting our ass about this stuff. But when you get to a combat situation and you start realizing that those small things in discipline actually fall down a whole nother path, because if you have that small framework and then you build up to the next thing and the next thing, that discipline kind of runs throughout. And it definitely showed. It showed in how we were postured out there with the enemy. It showed in how we did things, how our company area looked, how the base looked. But really in moving forward too, the type of person they were, and those disciplines, some of it, not always, some of it was a little rough to go through. And some of it wasn't always, I guess the way that the first sergeant had intended that the discipline be instilled throughout, as some of that NCO Corps would very heavily handed dish out the, what you would think of as discipline. But really those carrying over into your life, it is overlooked, and people look at it and, oh, that's a ceremony. And a lot of, people in the military, oh, I hated that, or the boot shined and things like that. But those little habits is where it all starts, and it is your overall effectiveness there.
That is an interesting one. Yeah, because obviously, the movies make a big deal about that sort of stuff usually as well. And I think what they fail to convey is the reason behind it all, which you just have very well.
It's so funny too, because the people in movies that have been in military, like that's the things they pick out. They're like, oh, look at this. This would never happen, or that would never be there, or the dust cover is open on that. It's like, that nobody else is catching this stuff, but you are, because it's been ingrained. These type of habits have been ingrained in you, and there's a reason.
Yes. Well, maybe we best not dwell on what film and TV gets right or wrong, and that'll be a whole episode on its own, wouldn't it? But
yeah. Our old Sergeant Major, he's actually involved in the film industry now for that very purpose, though. He goes through and he's like, this doesn't look right. Hey, listen to me. This is how it should be. And the thing is, though, is it makes a difference. It really does. Because when you see the seasons he's worked on with, I know Walking Dead was one of them. But you see some of the movies and stuff. I'm not going to go into all of them, but, he's done some good stuff, like in moving forward after that. But again, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like maybe it's possible to get too realistic with that sort of thing, though, isn't it? It's supposed to be entertainment after all.
I can't remember. I think it was the SEAL movie that was out there, and they got in trouble for actually letting out some of the SOPs. And I know it was unintentional, but I think it was like maybe some of the door stacks, in methods where they float in and stuff. But sometimes this stuff I can understand the value of not letting out some of this information to where we just take it for granted. That was actually something, so OPSEC, operational security, that was something we ran into, and I actually talk about in the book, to where one kid unintentionally was just talking to an interpreter that ran the contractors that were doing something we had some towers come in. So we would work through and with locals in order to boost the local economy to try and like offset, like, hey, like maybe we can gain some sort of through this, like put a face on things, or, change sort of the local attitudes towards us being there in that way. And, but he was a spy, and he was literally probing this kid for information, and nobody had any idea that this was happening until, so myself and one of the squad leaders decided that, hey, look, these guys have cell phones. When they come on to the outpost, I noticed that sometimes some of them get on them, when we're leaving and this and that. Who are they calling? And so when you're starting to have to reroute patrols and like make it look like you're going one way, and then all of a sudden, once you're out of eyesight, you're somewhere else. So we're like, all right, how do we nip this in the bud? Like, let's confiscate their cell phones when they come in, and they get them all back when they leave, so they get the cell phone box. Well, we had this cool little tool called a Celex, and we decided to start plugging their phones in, and hey, let's see what these things got on them. Is there any numbers? And this guy's phone just was like a Christmas tree. It just popped hot, like right off the bat. It's like, hey, there's numbers, there's this and that. And this video was on there of this kid talking about our night vision capabilities, like, and how it's not like you think. We can't see out as far as you think, on nights like this. And we were just like, whoa, like, and not even realizing the type of information he was giving up. But it's like, and it might not have even made too much of a difference. But I'll tell you what, the area where we were, on how the enemy used a good amount of ingenuity, and they would use like things like that. They could very easily use information like that. I mean, they were doing such things as like, so our area was very bomb heavy. They knew they couldn't take us in a direct action scenario. They tried a few times. It didn't end so well. And I mean, well, we'd wipe the floor with them every time. So they were just like, we'll pull out, and we'll put in landmines, no problem. And we'll just wait, because they'll walk around in it. And, that was pretty much the case. But they were doing things such as like, they would cut something out to where the light from the trees that was coming through would kind of naturally direct your eyes towards somewhere, and you'd naturally head into this way. It was just wild. Like when you started seeing the different tactics they were using, they were they're a hell of an enemy to deal with. And when we finally took out that emplacement team, I mean, you could tell it was them, because things in the valley like quieted down quite a bit.
Wow, yeah, it's interesting, the ingenuity behind some of these things sometimes, isn't it? And difficult for me to comment, because obviously I've never been in that situation myself. But
people don't realize some of the other instances. Like, so one of them, I stepped right over the initiator for one. The first large IED that we hit in Arghandab was December 26th. So day after Christmas, and we're out on a patrol, and we come into this compound, and, we had a mine detector with us. This guy right out in front of us was clearing everything. Nothing, completely clear. I stepped in and was across setting up my radio when one of the kids must have stepped like just slightly different than everybody else and hit the initiator to one of the larger charges that was actually up in the wall from us. So the initiator was made of a composite hockey puck with, the amount of metal material in it was maybe the size of a safety pin. It's not anything. And in an area to where the iron content in the soil is so high, along with a whole bunch, they were always trying to calibrate and tweak these mine detectors. You could never really get them to work. It was really more about staying alert and aware to everything going on, around you in your environment, looking and seeing, like there was, they started laying out tripwires, and there was, they would use either fishing wire or tape filament. The old cassette tapes, they would use that as, those were, oh my gosh, ridiculous. Like you'd find them just throughout fields, and the orchards that were there were just densely packed with all the vegetation, and all of a sudden there'd be a tripwire. So there was guys adapting to the way of, one of them actually had a, those little mini kids fishing poles that are like maybe about 2 feet high. And he had some lead casting weights, and he would actually, at the front of this patrol, with the machine gunner next to him, be tossing out and reeling in to pull any tripwires and stuff. It was interesting, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty clever solution, isn't it? You got to work with what you've got, I suppose.
Yeah, well, it's like some of those nighttime movements. If you, and that's when they were primarily using that stuff. If you're moving at night, you're not going to see something like that. So I guess like that's the best possible thing you could have done. Throw that out there. There was another one where they took a crescent wrench, and it was a crescent wrench and some parachute cord. And you just whip it out there and then pull it back in. Hope for the best. Yeah.
Well, I mean, if it works, don't knock it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
War's obviously a very serious business, but at the same time, you're still human, aren't you? And I think in any situation, I obviously can't speak to that, but certainly in the civilian life, when things get serious and stressful over an extended period of time, it is quite important still to try and maintain that sense of humor, that sense of normalcy almost.
Yeah. So
I guess my question then is, how did you do that? And have you got any funny stories that you'd like to share?
There's a lot of funny stories. And there's there's just, you can't dwell on the negative all the time, because when you do, I started actually noticing like the guys that were, it's just a miserable existence, even having to do that. And even if you're in, the shit, as they would put it, you got to be able to look at the funny, or take the good with the bad, so in seeing this afterwards, there was one instance, and just like in the middle of combat, to where we flowed into a particular compound, and we're in there, and the squad leader had a bad case of dysentery, and he is just like, "Hey, teams, take care of it. Get the guys up and going. I'm done. Like, I need to empty out the contents of my bowels here." And he's in the corner over here, and just gut wrenching. And this grenade. All of a sudden, we hear. I'm on the radio, and I hear this cracking through the branches in like the next door orchard. Like something was just like a baseball was just thrown through the trees, and you hear this dunk, and it, like right before this thing came into our compound, it hit a tree branch and knocked around the corner from us. Boom! Somebody had thrown a grenade at us. And it just went from this full on, the funniest thing ever. I've never seen anybody, get into kit, like pull up their pants and get into kit so quickly. And I think afterwards we were all, just talking about it, laughing and harassing each other and stuff. But between, instances like that to where you can laugh about that. And then there was, you got instances where they brought in a freezer Connex at one point. So we had been, if you really had seen where we had been. The Seabees came in and they saw, in the last 3 months they came by, or 2 months, and they're like, whoa, like, this is crazy. We hadn't seen anything like this since the invasion. Like, we can't believe when's the last time you had a shower? And it was like, I don't know, 2 months, 3 months. And, like, we would literally reroute patrols through the canals, to be able to at least dust off some of the funk. And, so they're like, we got you guys. And we were like, I don't know how you're going to do that, just because the only way that we would get things come in, we'd have mail brought in with a sling load. They'd attach 2 pallets to the bottom of a helicopter and bring it in over us and drop these things in the field in front of us and then take off. That was how we got mail. Nobody drove out there because it was just too treacherous. And they got somebody to do it. They brought an engineering company by, and they brought this huge freezer Connex in, and we were just over the moon about it. And we had this cook out there who had no job up until now at this point. He was, you have nothing to cook, you just dole out MREs and make sure the list was good. So he put a lock on it and everything. And that night, myself and weapons squad, we went out there and cut the locks because we had been told there was these big 5-gallon drums of Ben and Jerry's. And we straight up took on a 5-gallon pail of cookies and cream, and we got so sick afterwards. But it was just one of those things. It's a good moment. You just guys all sitting around, and the cook had no idea. He was racked out somewhere. We were just laughing about it. Of course, the next morning he finds out, and we just laughed it off on him. Like,
yeah, well, I'm glad you still found some ways to have fun at least. Yeah.
You have to.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, we've alluded to leadership a few times already, but what would you say from your whole career so far has been the biggest leadership lesson that you've learned?
So the biggest leadership lesson is you can't do it on your own. With anything, with any working team like we had over there, but translating even to creating a project like this book, I wouldn't have been able to do that without them. The publisher came out and was like, in the initial talks and everything, they're like, hey, can you supply us with 30 good high-res pictures? And I'm like, yeah, sure, not a problem. And what they didn't know is, like, at the time I had, 5 grainy Facebook pictures, and was like, all right, how am I going to do this? And that's really how it all, started coming down, is they put the accountability on me once they started showing up and once they started bringing stuff forward. Like, all of that stuff that you see on social from the last year, that was all them, like, bringing it out and saying, hey, like, this is what I have, if it will help and it'll help bring the story forward, like, do it. Or the guys that I had to sit down and interview. There was a bunch of them to where I would not be able to get that picture. And I know for a lot of them, that's a tough thing for them to do, to sit down and open these traumas back up. And quite honestly, though, for all of us, it ended up being good for a lot of people. Not just me, in the way of slowing down enough to kind of really process some of this. I kind of noticed afterwards that, in writing some of this, there was some chapters where tears are just streaming, to where I'm like, where is this coming from? Because I've always been able to talk about it, but it was really slowing things down enough to really, I guess, come to terms with everything that had happened over there. And it was like, man, we share these burdens together, though. And, in doing so and in moving forward together and whatnot, I don't know, it's just been a really good experience, and seeing them, at the launch event, down at the Airborne and Special Operations Museum. That was, man, if there was anything that I wanted to make sure of, it was not to screw up that event. Yeah, it was all about trying to make it special for them. But, like, again, we work off of each other. Like, having them there and seeing them there and, like, hey, that they support you and that they're behind you after all this time. And, like, really, some of them have memories that are contrary to what's in the book. And that's not a dig on anybody or anything either. It's more of a perception. And then also realizing that in these instances of high stress is a lot of people don't realize that, as a human being and stuff, we're designed to work together. We literally in these type of situations sync up. It's weird, but I mean, that's part of what pushes you together in these high moments of stress, and why really, quite honestly, you can call any one of those guys. I can call them up and they're there, and it's almost like you guys never left each other. You're still, you still have that same rapport, and they're still just willing, to open up about certain things. Or if you have an ask, they're willing to do what they can in that instance. It's pretty amazing. So yeah, team. It's all about the team, man. It really is.
Yeah. Not the first time I've heard that, but it's from a very different perspective than most people would say that. So thank you.
I mean, it goes furthermore. I mean, like, it's not even just to the internal there. I mean, if you are building anything as well, it is all about team.
It's certainly a very strong bit of proof to support the case, though, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Without the people around them, a leader is basically nothing and kind of pointless.
Yeah.
Too many leaders in businesses and managers and things forget that, I think. But.
Well, we had a hell of a command team, and one of the biggest things to come back from them was looking at, like, where does the arrow of responsibility point? And that would be, is it that the leader, is everything going towards them? Or are they trying to push resources down to the teams? Like, hey, what's going on over here? What's this? Like, what is that leader about boosting themselves up? Or are they about, making sure the team's taken care of, in any which way, like either his job or beyond even, and they did that. They did an incredible job, at that, and still do.
Yeah, and in such difficult circumstances as well. That can only be admired, I think. Okay, this question might be difficult. A lot of people struggle with questions on this theme, I must say. So we'll see how you get on.
All right.
If you could go back in time, firstly, how far back would you go in your own lifetime? And secondly, what advice would you give your younger self?
So I would just go all the way back to the beginning, quite honestly, and literally not give them, because really the journey is, what makes everything, but let them know, like, hey, look, man, like, hang in there, and stay more alert to what's going on around you, because these opportunities and these instances and stuff, you're not going to see it, and right now you're not even going to understand it, but stay open to that, and just keep moving forward. Like, always have that mindfulness about you, but move forward. Take that next step or leap.
Yeah, no, I think it's good advice. Yeah, I mean, somebody's asked me this question before as well, and I really struggled with it, which is why I ask everyone else now.
There you go.
It's exactly what you said, though, isn't it? Like, the journey is what matters sometimes, and so if you could go back and change it, then it diminishes the experience somehow, I think. But,
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a funny one though, because on the other hand, who wouldn't want to do something differently in their life? Like, it's
that conundrum, but I mean, like, at the same time, like, if you look at it, there's no, unless of course we come up with some sort of time folding, there's no going back. So all you can do is move forward. So right now, what better time than the present? It's, if that's something built into where, I missed my chance. Like, no, you didn't. You just need to learn how to adapt, or you need to recognize that just wasn't meant to be.
Yeah. Spot on. I like that answer even better, actually.
Summarized, right?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
Leadership Heroes.
Okay, last question then. This is my favorite question as well. Again, a lot of people struggle with this one, but we'll see. It's called Leadership Heroes. So if you had to pick one person, and it could be anyone you like, alive or dead, past or present, real, fictitious, who in your opinion would perfectly embody leadership, who would that person be and why?
Oh, perfectly embody leadership. All right, my answer is going to be controversial as hell right now, because I'm going to go all the way back Genghis Khan. I wouldn't say he perfectly embodied leadership. So if there's a book out there and it's called Genghis Khan and the History of the Modern World, and there's a lot of things that are explored in there that I wasn't aware of. I mean, how many figures in history, for one, kind of literally altered the carbon footprint on the planet, but but a lot of the stuff that he did, atrocity wise and stuff, that stuff is actually not stuff that he did. That stuff is that came later on from generational family that started doing things in the name of the great Khan, stacking skulls in front of villages and stuff like that. So therefore he kind of created, that legacy. And it was actually it was either Pakistan or India, like at that point. It's been a while since I've read it. I actually want to go back through it again. But during the Spanish Inquisition, that end of the world, the Catholic Church was afraid of the Mongols, because they were like, hey, they're invading portions of, I think they were invading portions of England at the time and stuff. And they're like, oh man, like this is a serious threat. And they sent emissaries from the church to say, stop what you're doing in the name of God. And he laughed at them and he said, are you kidding me right now? And he's like, do you realize that a good majority of my kingdom is Christian? It's like, and did you also realize that throughout all of the different, the sects and the different areas that I control and everything, he's like, I don't try to control their religion. Like that's their business. We don't have a state-run religion. And he actually had, and this had to do with some of what he would do in the conquering end, is he actually had a round table of religious people that were discussing at the time of the Spanish Inquisition, where like the Catholic Church is going after, heretics and all that. Looks like a bunch of it was a money scheme. But he's like, these guys are building off of each other and we're taking the best sides of these and we're seeing each other's views and realizing that we're all the same. It's, so we're moving forward in that way. And he would do that, time and time again. And that was actually one of the things that, in taking over, new areas and new cities and whatnot, a lot of it, the battle was done before they even got there. He's a genius. He would send psyops forward, the Khan is coming, like everyone's going to die. And half the times the opposing army would defect. They're literally just be like, yeah, I don't feel like dying. And they'd all just leave before he even got there. Or when they got there, just come out and be like, oh, you're good. City's yours. Just wild stuff.
Yeah. Maybe it's the originator of PR. Who knows? Yeah. It's interesting though, because I think maybe that sort of thing is what's worked against his reputation in history, because he was putting out that kind of persona to, help him win a battle without fighting effectively. Interesting though. I'm going to have to read the book.
It is a phenomenal read. I've sent it out to a few people that I know and stuff, and they come back and they're like, man, like this is not what I expected. Like this is pretty good. So it has to do with collaborative efforts. I mean, I know as much as the warpath he was on. But if you look at his past too, you start to realize, like, I mean, he literally ended up having to kill one of his own family members at the time. Like it was insane. So you have to look at those traumas as well. Like, wow, this person was willing to do anything.
Yeah, it's interesting the historical figures. They always are, because there's always a tale of two halves there, I think. It always doesn't matter which historical figure you pick, does it? And then, of course, there's the problem of knowledge as well. We don't, and we can't really know everything about them now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the secularism thing is quite interesting, though. Because, I mean, you look at any big empire from history. I mean, certainly the British Empire and England going further back. Like, I would argue that some of our most shameful bits of history were driven by state-sponsored religion. So when you hear about someone like Genghis Khan, who's got that fearsome, horrible reputation as a villain, saying things like, well, I don't really care about state religion. It's interesting. This is why I love history.
Right?
Anyway, well, I know you've got another appointment you need to get to, so I won't take up any more of your time except to ask if any of the listeners would like to learn more about you, perhaps get a copy of your book if it's available yet. Would you like to point them towards website or similar?
It is. So it's available on Amazon. Casemate has it, Barnes and Noble. I think what's the big one in the UK?
Probably Amazon.
Really? Okay.
Yeah,
talking about the Weatherstones or something. Yeah, Amazon.
Yeah. Waterstones.
Waterstones. That's what it is. Yes. So Waterstones has Amazon. They've been having trouble keeping it on the shelves in places. So Amazon's probably your best bet. And then as far as all of the, I have author signed copies on, although you're UK. But damnthevalleybook.com. There's, you have a bunch of stuff up on there too. You can, links to social and actually see the guys you're reading about. I try to make sure that there's stuff in there to where the people are labeled in the pictures on social media, or you can even go to the Airborne and Special Operations Museum in Fayetteville, North Carolina. So there's what's over there? They had some kit and a top. They had a backpack actually from a suicide bomber incident. So where one of the guys, there's holes through it. It's just peppered with holes from ball bearings. And he had been standing there just minutes prior or seconds prior, really. So between that, there's some neat artifacts over there, and the flag from the cover, that was recovered from the battlefield in Afghanistan. So plenty of places you can go see it, touch it, feel it, learn about it. And there's more books coming from that particular conflict. So it's going to be cool to start pulling this thing apart and unveiling everything.
Lovely. Well, plenty of options then. And I'll put the website address in the episode description as well, so everyone can find it easily. Well, I'll let you go because I know you've got something else to get to. So thank you so much for sharing all of your stories and your insights into leadership and beyond. It's been great talking with you today. Much appreciated.
No, David, same. Thank you for having me on. Appreciate it.
Lovely. Have a great rest of your day.
You too.
Thank you, Will, for sharing your story with us today. It's an inspiring journey, and there's some crucial lessons in there for anyone in leadership. Listeners, thank you again for joining us this episode. If you would like to get a copy of Will's book or learn more about him, then as always, please do find that link in the episode description and give it a click. If you are new to leading, then don't forget to sign up for your complimentary 60-day access to my Integrity Leaders online leadership community. Head over to www.leadernotaboss.com to learn more. Thank you so much for being here. I'll be back next week with another inspiring guest, Derek Johnson, US Army veteran turned life coach, who now helps people break out of old patterns so they can thrive, not just survive. I hope you'll join us. And in the meantime, be a leader, not a boss.